Well, we're joined now by Richard Barrett, former Director of Global Counter-Terrorism Operations at MI6, and by Sasha Havlicek, co-founder of the counter-terrorism think tank, the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. And Sasha Havlicek, I'm wondering what you make of this story.
Well, in the first place, it's clear that Guantanamo hasn't kept us much safer, and it shouldn't have happened. The fact is that those that sign up for foreign fights to become foreign fighters do, in fact, tend to do that on a repeat basis. So this is not an unusual case. Are incurable in a sense. Well, not incurable. I think we certainly work with many people that leave these movements, former extremists, and they can be very potent in countering the narrative of these organisations and movements. But it is true that repeat offence in terms of foreign fighting has been seen. We do see that. I think the main thing to consider now is that the risk is less one of the exodus of foreign fighters and more perhaps one of the return of those individuals now coming back from Syria and Iraq.
What is interesting, Richard Barrett, is that when in 2004 he was released, the Home Secretary of the day, as we heard there on that report, said he posed no threat to the British. Well, I suppose it's true, he didn't attack the British, but he posed a threat.
Well, yes, he posed a threat. I think the Home Secretary at the time said that none of the Brits who were released from Guantanamo would pose a threat to Britain. And to a certain extent, that's true, though, of course, you don't know the future. And what happened in Guantanamo may have increased radicalisation or even caused radicalisation. We have to bear that in mind. But in fact, if you look at, 10 years from his release in 2004 to his going to join the Islamic State, I believe he went there in 2014, it's quite a long period in anybody's life. I mean, this man is now in his late 40s, not necessarily a high-risk person for this sort of thing. But I think that one of the things that this maybe teaches us, that we need better risk assessment tools, not that are applied just at one moment, but perhaps applied sequentially over a period of time.
So one would have to keep them in our country, for example?
Well, not necessarily, but I think just be, insofar as is possible, have a look at people when they come out of somewhere like Guantanamo, when they come back from Iraq, Syria, as Sasha was saying, and say, OK, why did that guy join Islamic State or whatever extremist group it was? Why did they leave? And what does that mean for the threat of his turning into a domestic terrorist, which is, of course, very different from being a foreign fighter?
Do you think it is an issue in which we are actually making progress, or in fact, are the problems that confronted us in 2004 actually still the same today?
Well, I think in the first place, we've made great progress in terms of stemming the tide of foreign fighters to Iraq and Syria. That isn't just because we've done well from a policy or an intervention perspective. We've been lucky to some extent that we can control our borders perhaps better than our European neighbours. The appeal of the caliphate in terms of building this utopian dream, of course, is out now because of the progress made on the battlefield. So the messaging has shifted. And in fact, but I think the threat, of course, remains very much alive in terms of radicalisation and recruitment and the morphing of ISIS, of course, which will happen. And what we've seen now is ISIS issue very clear directives to its members to go online. They have imbued online fighters with the same value as, in fact, field fighters, which is quite extraordinary for this kind of movement.
But then, in a sense, therefore, it's telling us you stamp them out here and they will spring up again. So, I mean, say they cleanse Iraq of ISIS, which seems an improbable reality. But anyway, supposing they do, they will certainly not be gone.
Yeah, of course not. And in fact, the Islamic State make that very clear, as Sasha was saying, that this is an idea. Just as Al-Qaeda said, you can't get rid of the idea. You may be able to get rid of the people, you may be able to get rid of the territory, but you can't get rid of the idea. And I think the idea still has enormous resonance in many parts of the world.
Does the British government, do any governments have actually adequate resources to cope?
I think the British government has made mistakes in the past, but I think we've learnt a lot from those mistakes. I think we've been in this space perhaps longer than other counterparts. There's been great improvement in terms of our approach, not least because the non-law enforcement aspects of our work have increased. I think compared to our European counterparts, we've got a more robust civic sector engaged in this community.
Does the expert agree as well, for the man who's been in the field?
Yes, I think we do pretty well. And if you look at what's happened in the UK, I mean, we had Woolwich, of course. Before that, the major terrorist attack was way back in 2005, July 2005. So we've done well, but you only have to listen to Andrew Parker, the head of the Security Service, and others to realise that officials are still worried. You know, something could happen.
Richard Barrett, Sasha Havlicek, thank you both very warmly.